Thanks so much for the opportunity to come and speak here in Amsterdam and get to meet all of you. I've learned a lot from this event already. Primarily, it's not a stroopwafel, it's a stroopwafel. And thank you everyone for correcting me. But one of the cool things about working at Fly is we have an illustrator on staff. And so she kindly made this sticker for everyone. They've been quite popular, but I did manage to sneak a couple away. So after the talk, if you really want a stroopwafel sticker, please come and find me. But just a note about the illustrations, all of the illustrations in my slide were done by Annie. So thank you very much to her for helping cutify this whole process. So I'm an engineering manager at Fly, and we work in a really weird way. It's the strangest place I've ever worked. And it's strange because there's no product roadmap. There's no product managers. We don't do a lot of timeline-driven development. It's pretty much a mob of, I think we call them super smart, semi-feral engineers. We're about 100 people now, so this has gotten to be quite large to be doing this very creative, very open way of working. And it's actually probably a terrible idea for you to try to work this way, especially in an existing company, and I want to tell you all about it. So I was most inspired looking at the Fly environment and other teams that I've worked on where it's autonomous teams by this comic. Has everyone read xkcd here? Ever show of hands? Do you know this one, the nerd sniping comic? Yeah, a couple more? So I'll give you a second to read it. So it goes into, there's certainly a type of brain that's easily disabled. If you showed an interesting problem, it involuntarily drops everything else to work on it. And this has led us to invent a new sport. A dangerous sport, please don't try this out in public, but you see that physicist crossing the road. You just show him a problem, and he's immediately disabled, and then the truck, unfortunately, hits him. But a milder version of this, we can see in action at Fly. So nerd sniping, just to be clear, is presenting an often distracting problem that appeals to this obsession that people have. But really, I think it can be a tactic to make your team more autonomous. It can actually have all of these wonderful side effects about getting people really excited about the problem, getting them motivated to work on it, and motivated not just by a deadline or by pressure from the work environment, but motivated by curiosity. So really, autonomy's come up in a solid half of the presentations that I've seen at this event. With DevOps teams, it's always about this autonomy, breaking down silos, just really taking parts of the organization that normally wouldn't talk to each other and plugging them together. And so nerd sniping and some of the other tactics that I can talk about in this presentation will help you do that and help you introduce these smaller techniques into a system that's maybe already a bit too big to reason about. You thought you were coming to this quirky, offbeat talk, but I actually gotcha. It's the Agile Manifesto. What's old is new again. We build projects around motivated individuals. We give them the environment, we give them the space, and we get out of the way. We let them get the job done. This is just that all over again. Sorry, I'm unoriginal. But really, we're all going to the same place, right? We want to be building what matters. We want to be really satisfying that core need for independence and progression, autonomy. All of these are DevOps principles too, right? So it doesn't really matter if it's agile, if we find a way to repackage it to make it sound fun. We're all going to the same place. And like I said, nerd sniping it's really big at Fly. It's just everywhere in how we work. People started tagging me in when they're getting nerd snipes. Oh, it happened again. And we're really self-aware about it. We'll intentionally go into a conversation being like, hey, can I nerd snipe this person into working on this project? But people have come to expect it so much that Chris here had to say, oh, I'm not trying to nerd snipe anyone, like I'm just asking a question. And it comes up with customer problems too, right? We see support tickets as this perfect little package sometimes of this customer problem that we need to solve, but oftentimes it bridges the organization in a way that maybe if there wasn't this openness, it would be harder for us to tackle. And my favorite one is this person, they say it's literally why I got hired, to nerd snipe and be nerd sniped. It's how they think about their job at Fly. So just to impress upon you, like, I think this is one of the really unique things that I see in a bigger macrocosm of people who are really creative, working together, looking for that freedom. And even our customers know. I'll let everyone read a little bit. The customers started working on a workaround because there was a missing feature. And instead, they stopped themselves. They knew, oh, why don't we just nerd snipe them on Twitter? And they had the feature by the end of the day. How frequently have you as a customer gotten your missing feature within the same 24-hour period? Kind of wild. So let's break down how this happened, right? So Steve here saw the tweet. He shared the tweet with Thomas. And so part of it is understanding the person. Like, who is going to be really captured by this? And how do I connect with them? This one was easy. He just tagged him in. But sometimes you have to do more framing around it and kind of message it to that person. And then what could go right? What's the best result? So in this case, it's simple. It's making a feature. But maybe what could go right could involve better understanding of like the customer journey and where we're going. Or maybe it relates to platform design, right? Like maybe this part of our UX isn't quite right, and we all need to think about it together. And then this one's a little dangerous, right? Who here knows Cunningham's Law? Yeah, a little. So Cunningham's Law is the best way to get the right answer on the internet is to post the wrong one. So I'm not saying you should go around pretending to not know things or to be disingenuous, right? But it is very effective to say, oh, this seems trivial. And Steve did that well. This one ended up being relatively trivial, but sometimes it's not, and this opens up a really good discussion about what's blocking us, like what's in between us and the solution. And finally, this is, if you remember one thing from this talk, it's open questions. They usually start with what. It just opens up discussion. Rather than fully mapping out the entire solution for someone and then saying, oh, do you approve of this? Let's have an exchange, right? Like, let's get the buy-in, let's solve it together. And I'm thinking that most of you already do a lot of this, right? Like you see these customer problems, you're taking them to your team, but where do they go? Do they go into a backlog that's managed by product manager or partnership manager? Do they somehow get translated into a different language, right? Like by language, I mean, like, are they getting tagged with themes on a roadmap? Like, are you getting distance from the impact? I think if you focus on the open questions and then making time for your team to have that dialogue and that exchange and then actually go and do a little bit of work on it, then I think you can implement nerd sniping in your environment. I'm really looking forward to talking with people after this talk about where they think it would work and where they think it wouldn't. And I'll get more into that. So open questions. This one is really big. Every single person, every engineer, every manager, we all get training in asking open questions. This is just like a meme. So I'm going to go through some of my favorite ones here. So what's the hardest part about something? What would happen if we tried something else? And then this one's the best one. If you could wave a magic wand and change one thing, what would it be? And then what are you optimizing for? This one is really good when you disagree with someone, because usually you don't see the facts differently. Like the facts are the facts. It's just what you're trying to get the outcome to be is a little bit different. And then a bonus one here, I'll say, is if you went to bed and then you woke up the next day and everything was fixed, what would be the first little sign that you saw to tell you that it was fixed? right? And that's how you know the first change you need to make to solve some of these bigger problems. And this one I've seen be really, really successful in more rigid environments. Like I've worked with very, very strict agile processes. And the engineers on my team were just so fearful to take time on an experiment and then have it not actually result in a tangible feature or something they could kind of chalk up on the board, right? And we came up with a template for running experiments. And this is just like first grade, second grade science project. You know, you write your hypothesis, here's what we're gonna test, but you can zhuzh it up, make it look a little fancier in Google Docs. And even if the experiment fails, you have what you tried, and hey, you learned that it didn't work, right? But this has seemed to be more acceptable in more strict planning processes because you have a document, you have something that shows that you did this work. And then the other thing that I've seen really successful is if you do have the time to set aside in your sprints, definitely do that. We've had hack weeks where someone will get an idea, they'll write up an experiment template, but then the benefit of the hack week is we'll have like a company-wide or a department-wide demo, and they'll actually get to show off what they built and what they tried, and usually it's a bit more casual. But I think the biggest thing that's helped me as an engineering manager is book clubbing with the other engineering managers and senior leadership, with key like senior members of your engineering team, whoever is doing a lot of this planning work. And we read Slack together. Has anyone else read Slack? No hands. Okay, this is my biggest, one. Okay, this is my biggest recommendation. And the irony is that one of the strictest engineering leaders that I worked with in terms of timeline-driven development, we didn't have a lot of Slack. They were actually the person who recommended me this book. But I do think that having these small group discussions with all of the people who are involved in the planning process in a way that's not focused on a particular work item, right? Like there's no charge, there's no one pressuring them to get that done. Just having this more abstract discussion about what do you want this team to be? How do you want to work? I've found that to be a really productive use of my time, and I recommend it to you all. So taking a step back, maybe you're trying some of these things, and maybe you see glimmers of it working somewhere, maybe it doesn't work somewhere else. This is generally what you should see happen. When you're going in and nerd sniping, when you're bringing up these customer issues, or you're seeing something that's maybe a little bit wrong in the code that needs to be tweaked, that's interesting, suddenly everyone has an opinion, right? That's how you know it's a nerd snipe. You get long threads, 100 messages in a thread or more, and lots of questions. And then one of the really cool things that I've seen is lower status. So by lower status, I mean people who maybe don't have like the power in traditional work environments to say, hey, we should work on this project, and then have people just trust them, right? And just go forth and do it. So lower status people have initiated work for higher status people. So that could look like your early career engineers asking a lot of really good questions and pointing things out, and then your more senior engineers picking up those projects, right? Or working together on them. And then customers getting features and fixes. Let's maybe lower the standard. It doesn't have to be within a 24-hour period to start, but you do see more of that really impactful work getting done. And finally, this isn't about pushing people to overwork. This is about working at a sustainable pace, right? Where you're being driven by real curiosity. It can be abused. I think everyone here is probably thinking, oh, this is an excuse for my product manager or my manager to just bring up bugs that they want to have fixed and then expect everyone to just fix them. Is that what people were thinking? Other people doubts in the audience. So we created this Maslow's hierarchy of nerd sniping as a way to just have these conversations, right? So why do you want to do this work? Is it because your boss said, hey, I'm interested in this, and you're like, oh, I need to impress them, everyone's getting laid off in the industry, like, oh crap. I need to do this to feel safe, right? Or maybe you feel like you need to do this work to belong with the team, like to get along with what the rest of the group thinks. Those two, not so hot on those reasons. Like, I think maybe you should pause and reconsider. The one where I feel like it's acceptable sometimes is that skill development. And sometimes people call this like resume-driven development. Like you get excited about a certain technology, the opportunity comes up. Sometimes I'll indulge a little bit and take that, but maybe pause before doing that. But once you start getting into this upper part, like this, what would be psychological or self-fulfillment in the Maslow's hierarchy, that genuine curiosity, and then the customer impact. If you're spending time on a problem because you're genuinely curious, like of course put up limits, right? Like don't spend all day on it, time box it, do some other like time management around it. We can talk more about that. But the real golden stuff here is that customer impact. And by that I mean customers will pay you more money or they will not churn from your product, like very concrete things that you can talk about. Again, I'm entirely unoriginal. This is actually just a DevOps principle. It's one of the 5 C's or one of the 7 C's. It's customer-centric decision-making. So it's thinking about what the actual impact is of your work. And I think one of the biggest rebuttals that I get is, isn't this just you going around and manipulating your coworkers into doing the projects that you want them to do? And to that I say no, because leadership isn't just nerd sniping into getting people what you want them to do. It's about the customer impact. So if you're genuinely approaching this process from wanting to have this good impact for users and for your team, then you're not going to be manipulating people. And even just the technical definition of manipulation, it requires that there is an asymmetry of information and that you have this intent, right? And so if you have, like, from the goodness of your heart, you want people to be doing good work, then I really would not worry about it being manipulative. And so you have to remember, with great power comes great responsibility. We have to really think about the power dynamics here. Who here knows the phrase, the hippo? Yeah, a couple. So the hippo is the highest paid person's opinion. You don't want to be that person, right? And you want to, if you're in the position, if you have the status within the organization to call that out, you can work to counteract that. So the hippo you can ignore all the data, right? It's just this person has status, so we have to do what they want. And I see that really creates the distance from the customer impact, right? Because you're distracted, you're thinking more about the impact on that person. So I said, be aware of power dynamics. Very, very tactically, I see us checking in on our nerd sniping as we're doing this. And I think this is just this maturing system. So we actually ask for consent a lot of the time. Z asked Jesse, are you free to get nerd sniped? It's like, so you can say no, like I have too much on my plate, I'm not interested, find someone else. And then I checked in. I do a lot of nerd sniping. I get very excited about these problems. And I checked in, it's like, hey, like, am I doing this too much? So just simple things like that, it helps curtail and make this a more equitable process. And then, of course, I keep saying this, the work really needs to have impact. So I notice people will be successfully nerd sniping, this whole group, right? They'll be in a long thread. And then John here is really good about this. He paused. He said, it's working well enough, right? Like, I don't want to nerd snipe more people into this. Let's pause and make sure that this has already had the impact it needs to. And then really the whole point of nerd sniping is to get people curious and excited and engaged with work, right? our professional development budgets are being cut pretty much industry-wide. It's getting harder and harder to motivate your team. So here is a way to make work really tempting, right? To get people genuinely engaged. And I see this time and time again where people say, oh, that was really sticking in my head. Like, I thought about that all evening. And of course, there's limits. Like, we don't want people doing a ton of work in their off hours. But I think that's way better than disengaging and being, the opposite. So some signs that you are ready to nerd snipe in your organization. It doesn't work everywhere, but if your engineers can say no to projects, if they can say drop their ongoing work to take a couple hours, run an experiment, or even just take longer, right, to negotiate those priorities and those trade-offs, if they have the autonomy to do that, then A+. You should start nerd sniping right away. Another really good sign is if engineers regularly initiate the projects. So I've worked in organizations where it was pretty much just through product management or through like a founding team. There was a clear pipeline of projects that were queued up for engineering, and they had almost no say in what they worked on next. It was just going rote by the priorities. That organization probably going to be a distraction. Probably need to do a book club or negotiate like a hack week time before you can just start firing off ideas. And then engineers talk with the customers. This one can be hard even at Fly. We do a lot of interaction with customers on our forum. We have some customer calls, but I think that distance from the customer, that's the risk of a nerd snipe being unsuccessful, right? Because you're tied to that impact. So really get engineers in on customer calls or just directly interacting with them, like in real life, in the community. And then for experimentation to work, you have to be okay with failing, right? And having that psychological safety in your environment. And the experiment template that I talked about, that really is your tool there to make it safe to have a negative result on your experiment, but still have it seen as positive forward work. But just remember, autonomy really requires responsibility. That's the deal that we're making for autonomous teams, is that you really need to think about the impact, but especially if you're higher up in that leadership hierarchy, you have more and more responsibility to make sure the direction that you're giving to the team is aligned with real business impact, right? Like, you can't send people off on wild goose chases. You can't just start a line of questioning and then ghost them. Like, you have to be responsible for this work that you're shaping together. And it can be, I think that can be the most challenging part of this, is you have to have a sense of where you're trying to push people and where the product is going and what the customer experience is. So if you're going to be doing this, you need to essentially be like a product leader in your organization, and you have to have a more democratized sense of the product and where it's going in your organization. But if you take away two techniques, try out those open questions and try to make more time to explore. And opening up that time for your engineering team. And with that, this is actually all influence skills. This is a whole field of study in engineering management. So if you check out, there's a QR code for a link tree. I've put some starter links for, there's 2 worksheets of open questions. There is an outline of how to learn about another person's core needs. So how to understand them so you can nerd snipe them better. And I think my LinkedIn's on there. You can add me. But I would just love this stuff, right? So please come find me after if you want to chat about how to make your team more autonomous and more experimental. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie.